This recipe was super fun to make and very, very easy. Thank you to Farmhouse on Boone for her potato and ricotta gnocchi recipe. It's over on her blog. Of course, I will link it in the description. A few caveats though, because I did want to make this using freshly milled flour. Her recipe calls for all-purpose flour, which is why in the description of her recipe, she calls them soft and pillowy, because all-purpose flour will have that effect on a really good gnocchi recipe. Now, that doesn't mean that these gnocchi did not come out really great and tasty, but when you're using a whole grain, a freshly milled whole grain, I used hard white wheat. I did not sift it, so everything was intact, even the bran pieces. You get a more rustic gnocchi that has a bit of a bite to it. Personally, I prefer pastas that are more rustic and have more of that bite, that al dente texture. Sort of reminds me of when we're visiting family in Sicily and we go to visit my dad's aunts or cousins in the mountain town that they're from, and they make the homemade pasta. And yeah, it has that rustic feel. It's not super light and airy like a lot of the pastas that we're maybe used to here. Anyways, I substituted the all-purpose flour, like I said, for freshly milled hard white wheat. I'm assuming you could use a soft white wheat and maybe you would get that more pillowy texture that she describes. Perhaps if I were to have sifted the hard white wheat, I could have achieved that texture. But like I said, I wasn't really going for that, but for curiosity purposes, I may give that a try in the future. Now, I did try to go 1-for-1 on the flour measurement, but as you'll see, I did an initial mix of the dough and then, of course, let it rest because it is freshly milled, so you want to let it rest and soak up the liquids before you decide to add any other flour to it. But as I started to knead the dough out, I felt that I needed to add some more flour. So you'll see me kind of like adding a pinch here and there until I thought the texture felt right in my hands. Another reason for this could be that I deviated from the recipe a bit because I did not bake the potatoes. I did use russets, but I didn't bake them. So I boiled them, which means they had a bit extra water content, which could be the reason that I was finding I needed to add a little bit of extra flour. I do think though, if I had used the baking method of prepping the potatoes with less of the water content, I still think it would have been a more rustic texture, but I don't know. Again, for the sake of time, I boiled them, but maybe in the future I will try the baked version with either sifting the flour or using a soft white wheat. I just don't have that on hand. This recipe is really satisfying because it comes together nicely and then you get to roll it out and cut it up into little pieces. So I don't know, I found that it was super easy, but also just very satisfying. Like, if you're a seasoned baker or even if you're new, when you have a dough that just feels good and feels right under your hands, that was this dough. And I was surprised because I did deviate from the recipe, like I said, so I was nervous that maybe it wouldn't turn out so great, especially in this phase here when you're trying to get the consistency of the dough right, but it worked out. They felt great as I was prepping them. And then you'll see in a minute or two, they cook beautifully as well. Gnocchi is one of those dishes where if I go to a restaurant, even, growing up and stuff, and they had it on the menu, we didn't eat them at home much. So I would always order them and I loved them. And they were always served with a nice rosé, cheesy tomato sauce with cream and just so good. So I did not do a rosé for these. I just did a basic tomato sauce with some Parmesan cheese, and it was equally as delicious. But now that I know how simple they are to make, I don't know why I ever kind of shied away from them. I know some people, even in our Italian family, shortcut that they use is using the boxed mashed potato mix that are like, I guess, like flaked potatoes. They've used those and have said that they've had great results from using it. Well, that's not something probably I would do, just because I like to use a whole organic potato, blah, blah, blah. But I do know that people like doing that method and they say they come out great. So, all this to say, gnocchi may look or seem like a more involved pasta to make, but they're pretty forgiving from what I found. And that little rolling technique is to kind of give them that pinched gnocchi feel. I don't have that mandolin looking tool where you get the ridges on the gnocchi. That would be great because they would hold sauce really well. But I have to say these did okay even without the ridges, just their smooth texture. They held the sauce pretty well and they cooked up super quick. I was nervous that they would kind of turn to mush because that can happen sometimes when you're using potato and flour. Sometimes if the texture of the dough is not right, once they hit the water, they can completely break apart and turn to mush. So I was fully prepared for that to potentially happen, but as you can see, they held, they were nice and firm. They were not hard, but like I said, they had that really satisfying al dente bite to them. If you give this recipe a try, whether you use the original recipe or a freshly milled version, I don't think you will be disappointed at all.